morning, Father.
Good morning, Jess. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. It's been a long weekend.
Yeah.
Somebody told me, Father, you look tired. Yes, I am tired.
How kind of them to point it out.
At the seminary, when they would tell you look tired, you were in trouble a little bit. You were supposed to always look
You're supposed to be
happy
cheerful,
and
right?
rested.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the 5th time that we meet for this message for FaithGroups.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great gospel again. You've heard the homily twice.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear it twice? You were in Faith Formation.
I heard parts of it and then the full
version
at 10.
Even with
yeah.
your 2 children and a husband.
I managed. Clara was very good today.
She was good today. That is true. That is true. So what we said last week, and I started the homily, you always need like a framework, like a way to convey the message you want to convey. And I wanted to look at last week's gospel and to see the connection. It's an encounter of Jesus with Jesus. Somebody who is defined one way at the beginning of the gospel ends up being a disciple of Jesus on both occasions. Right. Both acknowledge, actually, they are theophanies, as you discussed this with the Faith Formation people today, right?
Yeah, that was a good session.
And I think it helps us to get used to this language for Holy Week. So I would always do cycle A Gospels. Even if a church wouldn't have catechumens, I think I would always use these Gospels.
Yeah, because you can. You can choose to do that.
What do you see in the Gospel? What would you say? Maybe you saw something in the homily that you had not thought about. What do you bring today?
I really loved in the homily, and Mike and I just looked at each other and just made this face when you said the better question is not what would Jesus do, which is something I grew up with. We had the wristbands and the keychains and the everything, but rather what would Jesus see, and that really just stopped me in my tracks, right? Because you have to see something before you can react to it.
I don't think that what would Jesus do, and hopefully people are familiar with that or they were at the homily. I don't think it's wrong. It's okay, but it's very action-oriented.
Right.
And this is previous, Before action, before anything, before prayer, before action, before anything, there is. What do we see?
It's like the language we use with catechumens. It's. I would liken it to pre-evangelization. Father.
I like the idea that really the person enters the gospel being a beggar, and even the disciples, they see the illness and they see the disability, spiritual. Hopefully people understand this at different levels. We don't question that Jesus was able to heal a blind man, but obviously the gospel is telling us more than just physical blindness. That's how I took it. And sometimes I don't say that, and maybe we should say that every time we do it. No, we've said this before, the different gospels, the different ways in which a gospel text is appealing to a concept. But certainly, for me, it's about spiritual blindness. Through the man, through beginning to see things the way Jesus sees them, he ends up being a disciple of Jesus. Like last week, the woman ends up being a disciple of Jesus as well.
And he ends up healed through that process of becoming a disciple and following Jesus, because Jesus cares for our physical bodies too, just as much. And so he will heal us through the process of learning to follow him. And something I realized just like 3 minutes ago, when you told me to sit here and think for 3 minutes, is because he's blind, the first thing that the man doesn't do, he doesn't see Jesus, right? That's not the first thing he does. The first thing he does is hear Jesus. And it just reminded me of when he says, "My sheep hear my voice and they follow me." So that gave me a good deal of hope, despite our limitations, despite what's going on in our life. Just listen and we'll hear him.
Listening and seeing connect with what we were saying, that it's previous to any action or any judgment we make.
Right.
We have to listen and to see first. And then to make sure that we listen or see in the way Jesus would. It was in the first reading, in the choosing of the children of Jesse.
Right, yeah.
Which is
I think it's so funny.
And it gives the line, great line, God sees not like men, it says men, not like humans see. And it's a great line. Yeah. Great line.
No, it is. And I was laughing because Claire was rapt at that story, because right now she's super into Cinderella, and she's like, it's like when they didn't call her down from the attic. Nobody else lives here.
Yeah. It's interesting how children understand and process things. I also liked, and I forgot to use the image or to ask people to pay attention to the image of the saliva and the mud, of the original mud,
Right.
of creation, because the man is being recreated through encountering Jesus, or through the healing. He's recreated into a new person. And hopefully we can have a question about this. I'm wondering what recreation would mean for me. In what area of my life? I was thinking about this question when I told you, I need a minute. I wanted to think about this before we started recording. I think I live life in a very tragic way sometimes. And maybe I could live it. I'm a joyful person, I think you would say, with sense of humor or whatever. But sometimes I should give more the benefit of the doubt to life. Normally I do with people. So less tragic. So my recreation maybe would be, I'm a little bit more optimistic, more hopeful.
Yeah. And my question was, where do I not see as Jesus sees? And okay, the list is very long, but it's good to think about and talk about it. Where do I need to see other people in other situations as Jesus sees? And I'm reminded of a couple of years ago, a priest friend of mine told me that it was not virtuous to not assume the best of people, and
yeah, that hurts.
Yeah, it does. So that's gonna be mine for the week.
It's a truth that hurts. Part of what we reflected about today also is, what is it that keeps us from seeing things the way Jesus would see them? And I mentioned that at the 10 a.m. homily. And it could be prejudgments, ideologies, habits, addictions. It could be many things. And one is anger, I think. Anger sometimes keeps us from understanding something or seeing it the way that Jesus would see them.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people really struggle with and won't confront, myself included. I'll put that there.
Anger is very primarial. It's very, how would you say that in English? A very raw feeling that it's very easy to default to it.
Yeah, I think you're looking for primal.
Primal.
It sneaks up on you.
And we need to be able to work through it.
Right.
Yeah. And you are thinking about the questions that you will offer, and I will slightly edit.
This video, we're going to have bloopers.
I would like to ask, what does recreation mean for us also? In addition to what do we see, what keeps us from seeing things like Jesus would see them, or what situation I'm thinking. I explained, for instance, that my Living Sacred Heart in June is a product of seeing things not from my human abilities or my human eyes, but with the eyes of Jesus, hopefully. But what situation are people thinking that they could either review because it has happened already or it's about to happen, no? And how do we look at it?
And I think it's good to mention that can be a process, of moving from looking at a situation or a person with human eyes to acknowledging that that's what you're doing and moving towards how would Jesus see that? Because I remember when you first told me that you'd been asked to do this, and it was a process.
For you too, it was a process for me also. Yeah, my first reaction wasn't the one that allowed me to write the announcement I wrote last week, certainly.
Yeah.
That reminds me of another healing of Jesus where the person doesn't see clearly first, and then he has to do the gesture again, and then the second time he sees, no? And that's a very good one also. It speaks more about process than this one. Interesting, because the Pharisees don't see the healing. They see that it's a Sabbath. They see that Jesus is not doing what they thought he should do. They are unable to see that this is the Son of God. So let's pray that we don't end up not recognizing the seeds of the gospel and Jesus in our lives as well. Anyway, we're moving to next week, the raising of Lazarus with our own image, our own painting. A beautiful one. Speaking of paintings, this week I love the one this week. Very simple.
Yeah, I do too.
I think I'm a 19th century guy. Maybe I was born
really?
in the wrong century, at least in terms of art. So we'll meet again next week.
Yeah, we will.
And we'll be discussing this last encounter, the most important one, Jesus with encountering death, the death of his friend.
His very good friend, Lazarus.
See you there then.
See you then.
Take care.
You too.
Bye.